the panel. Sitting with me here in the studio is my friend David Webb. David is the host of the David Webb Show on Sirius XM Radio. He's the co-founder of Tea Party 365 here in New York City. Always good to see you.
Absolutely, Rick.
And joining us from our Washington studio this morning is Richard Fowler, who is a Democratic political strategist. And it's always nice to talk to you, Richard, as well. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So let's talk taxes. We have a new sort of a stopgap budget that's going to keep the government up and running. There are going to be a lot of cuts in this, and of course we're approaching tax day. Richard, you just heard from William about the different states and what they tax folks. I went on the chat room and asked people if they'd be willing to pay a little bit more in taxes if it would bring down the federal deficit, which we hear is such a growing problem. The responses are, in a word, no. People saying that they have no interest in doing that they want to see government cut and waste eliminated before anybody's taxes are raised. What do you think about the whole tax question?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I think it's important that we do cut government waste, and we work on creating a sustainable budget. And I think what we're seeing from the president and from the White House is a commitment to just that, to making government more efficient and making government work for the American people. The president, the new budget that he released, he closes down a lot of offices that are doing the same task. He also talks about how we work on making sure that our debt doesn't happen in the future by investing in America's future and winning America's future.
Mm-hmm. I should tell you, David, that there is someone named Kevin on the chat room who wishes that you would run for president. So if you're looking for a campaign manager, Kevin, send us your contact information. Are we going to be able to fix the deficit just by cutting waste, though, or
no? You have to do a number of things, and let's look at the numbers in the president's budget. $3.8 trillion in spending this year proposed. That's 25.3% of GDP, the highest since World War II. $46 trillion in spending over the next decade. That's $8.7 trillion in new spending. $1.6 trillion in tax hikes on families, small business, and job creators, and revenues as a percentage of GDP, this is in the tax column, climbed to 20%, where the historical average is 18% in the United States. Mm-hmm. It also borrows $1.1 trillion for fiscal year 2012. That's a record fourth year. You can't deal in those numbers and say it's a responsible budget, because that's the numbers the president's proposing. We need to cut, we need to streamline, we need to tackle the entitlements. You and I have talked about this so many times. That both sides will not tackle the entitlements in this country, and we also need to really do something else, clean up government. The recent GAO report that there's $200 billion in overlap and a multiplicity of departments and responsibilities across bureaucracies and agencies, that's ridiculous. That is the growth and the actually unmanageable nature of the federal government right now. We need to streamline it, and that's not, all of these things have to happen. Defense spending, we have to streamline and update. We have to take care of the contracting and bidding process. We don't need 3 engines for a helicopter. We need 1 engine, not 400 million because it's in some congressman's district.
And yet the Republicans, though, David, have not proposed any real significant cuts at the Pentagon.
No, they haven't, and I am not happy with that, because the fact is that just like the farm subsidies, the Republicans play to their perceived electoral base. Well, I have a little news for America, and for the Republicans, rather, from America. We're big boys and girls, and we will take the bitter pill. We realize that we're going to have to cut. We're going to have to tackle these issues, because there is a long-term picture that does not look good economically. The numbers I just mentioned, we can't sustain this. Frankly, there isn't that much money in the world. And on the state level, which William mentioned in the opening segment,
right,
the unfunded pension liabilities in New York State, for instance, $35 billion. That's something that Governor Cuomo has to deal with. That's the long term. But if you don't start now with serious cuts and really reducing the cost and the growing cost of government at the state levels, people do pay too much. If you're in New York City, you can pay up to 53% of your salary when you combine your state, city, and federal taxes. Is that what people want to work for?
You don't have to tell me, as a resident, as a resident of New York State, formerly of the city. Richard, when it comes to those pension obligations that David just mentioned, and we are, of course, watching events as they unfold in Wisconsin, in Ohio, and other states where governors, Republican governors, newly installed, are confronting unions and really demanding unilaterally changes to the way that business has always been done with a lot of these public workers. I'm just wondering, is there any way to avoid that, or do we really? Are these Republican governors really left without a choice, given the fact that so many of these unions seem unwilling to make the kind of compromises that are really necessary to get these deficits and these fiscal problems in hand?
Well, I think that the governors do have a choice here. And a lot of these Republican governors, including Governor Walker, one of the governors that before saying that we had a budget problem passed a $117 million tax cut to big businesses in Wisconsin. This is what's happening in Ohio. This is also what's happening in Indiana. The members of the labor movement, my mom being one of them, they are willing to negotiate with the governors. They've said they will pay more in health care, they'll pay more to their pension, and all they want is collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is not a budget issue. Collective bargaining is a union busting issue, and the consequences of these governors' actions will be less education for our children. The consequence for these governors' actions will be basically destroying the relationship between employee and boss.
Completely wrong, Richard. FDR said that public sector unions were basically antithetical to the way we need to operate. Jimmy Carter, with a Democratic Congress, made sure that federal workers, unionized federal workers, could not collectively bargain. The specious argument in this is that we'll give you 5.8% in Wisconsin and we'll give you 12% to pension and health and respectively. Collective bargaining, which started under Mayor Wagner, was the goal and is the goal, because with collective bargaining, the unions can hold the states and the municipalities and the counties hostage to the best deal. New Jersey being a perfect example of a bad collective bargaining structure where they negotiate a deal and get, Democrats elected into one town, sign the deal with that town, and then go to all the other towns and say, you can't go lower than that. That's our level. Same thing in Wisconsin. The specious argument, the red herring, is we'll give you back something. The real goal of the unions is to maintain the power through collective bargaining, because they want to keep sucking on the public teat, the cash cow that feeds them. And this is unsustainable. And that is a fact.